Russia is breaking ceasefire agreements. Trump claims that trust Putin. How will the situation on the front affect the future peace agreement, and what are Putin's real intentions? These issues I'm going to discuss with Bild analyst Julian Röpcke. Mr. Röpcke, thank you for joining the stream and your readiness to share your opinion on some very important to our viewers issues. Okay, so I will start with the following. We have information now that in the latest phone conversation between Putin and Trump, there has been agreed that Russia and Ukraine will ceasefire on each other's energy facilities. At the same time, Putin continues striking the civilians. The day before, he carried out a massive strike on the Ukrainian city of Odessa. What is your opinion on the effectiveness of such an agreement? Does Putin really want to ceasefire, and will he do it?
Well, I think the alleged partial ceasefire Putin allegedly again agreed to is a perfect sign of why no one can trust Putin. I think it's absolutely clear that he broke the so-called energy infrastructure ceasefire from the first minute it was introduced. You remember that just hours after this, the city of Slovyansk was suddenly dark because he hit the energy infrastructure and also the Ukrainian railway services. They announced that at 1:20, I think, so this was, I think, 6 hours after he now announced it, that he already hit their infrastructure in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. And, well, it goes on since then. I mean, naturally, the Ukrainian defense forces are reacting to this. You know that they have been hitting energy infrastructure in Krasnodar as well as the Engels Air Base. And I think it's really a perfect example that if there is no one to control a ceasefire, Putin will just break the ceasefire. And if you want to see anything good from this, then at least this partial ceasefire about energy infrastructure he's breaking is giving us a very good glimpse, a very good forecast of what would happen if Ukraine agreed to a total ceasefire, and Russia as well. We have seen this unfortunately in 2014, 2015, and we will see it again right now that Russia is only interested in continuing the war. Why? Because it is in not a bad situation when it comes to the frontline situation.
Okay, so at the same time, Kremlin has already managed to accuse Ukraine and in particular Volodymyr Zelensky of disrupting the ceasefire agreements. The reason is the strike on the Engels airfield, which was carried out the day before. This is a strike on a military facility where Russia has accumulated missiles for strikes on the territory of Ukraine. May these accusations of Russia testify that Putin wasn't going to adhere to the ceasefire? What is your opinion?
Yes, I mean, you just mentioned it. Engels Air Base near Saratov is a military installation, so it was not covered by any ceasefire. If Putin thought that not striking oil and gas facilities, as well as not striking again Ukrainian energy facilities, which he did right after signing, or not signing, but agreeing to the ceasefire, then you can see how dead wrong he is. Of course, we have heard from Ms. Zakharova and others that, you know, the Nazi terrorists and all this kind of stuff should not do anything. I think the underlying problem here is that Putin and still don't understand that they are in a war with another country. And this means that this country is striking back at them. It's striking back at Saratov, it's striking back at Krasnodar, it's striking back at Belgorod. And as long as he does not understand this, or as long as he labels every counterattack by the Ukrainian army terrorism, I think there's no basis to negotiate with him. He must understand that he started this war. Ukraine is striking back. It has every right to strike back under international legal law and legal system. So Putin should stop being astonished and should stop reacting accordingly by withdrawing from Ukraine.
Okay. let's talk about conditions. How do you think it should happen? Complete halt to attacks? Should countries provide each other with a list of targets, or can it be attacked? What do you think about the conditions of this ceasefire?
Well, ironically, this is one thing Putin was right about. You need monitors. You need a system to monitor who is striking what and why. And you have seen this kind of system, which was the OSCE monitoring mission, a special monitoring mission. And as you know, it was outlawed. It was called terrorist organization by the the fake Russian republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. They called them terrorists, and if they call them terrorists, and Moscow says this is part of Russia, then Moscow itself calls the observers terrorists. So, I mean, this again goes into this dirty play Putin is playing with the whole world, I could say, not just with Ukraine, by, of course, first rightly stating we need observers, and then saying every observer is a terrorist. So, in the end, again, I do not see anyone who could control, at least observe, but even control, that would be better, a ceasefire between the two sides. And I think this is, of course, what Mr. Putin thinks, because right now he's still advancing, unfortunately, in Ukraine. Not so much in Pokrovsk area, but if you look a little bit further to the northeast, to Ceasefire area, there he has been capturing another 2 villages over the past couple of days. If you look to Velika Novosilka area in the south, they also have been capturing another 2 villages over the past 3 days. So unfortunately, the Russian army is still advancing. And as it is advancing, why would it have any reason to stop the war? I mean, you would have to bring Putin in a situation where he thinks it's beneficial to him to stop the war. It's beneficial to stop losing soldiers. It's beneficial to not advancing anymore, or even put him in a situation where he cannot advance anymore. Unfortunately, this point was not reached so far. So I fully understand, if I put myself just for a second into the criminal Vladimir Putin, I fully understand from his point of view that he is just giving excuses and in reality trying to push forward, because unfortunately he is not in a situation yet where he would have to stop his invasion.
Okay, let's talk about the regions that Putin wants to occupy, by he's unable to militarily seize the entire Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, Donetsk regions of Ukraine, but he wants to get them from agreement with Trump. In your recent article, you wrote that Putin wants to take most of Ukraine's natural resources, as well as keep under this control Europe's largest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, which is already in Russian hands. To what extent does Trump ready to support such ambitious plans of Putin?
Yes. I mean, absolutely right. I just said that the Russian army is advancing, but it is very slowly advancing and at a very high price. And even everyone in Moscow knows that militarily, if you want to capture Zaporizhia Oblast, you would need another 2 or 3 years maybe. If you want to capture Kherson Oblast, you would have to cross the Dnieper river. And even though it is much more narrow now because of Russians blow up the Kakhovka Dam, as you know, it is still a very ambitious endeavor. And they have been trying, you remember this in the very beginning of the war in Odessa, they have been trying their landing operation. It was only very close by, 11 ships, I think, were there. And they didn't do it because they knew it will be a high casualty endeavor. The same would happen if they attack Kherson over the river. So what is his answer? His answer is that we have to play like being big and being strong and being the winner. And then we have to convince Mr. Trump and the US government to give us what we want voluntarily without a fight. And of course, I think you and I know that no Ukrainian government, not for political reasons and not for military reasons, should ever give Kherson and Zaporizhia regions for free to the Russians. I mean, they know they will lose 100 soldiers for every 5 kilometers or 2 kilometers they advance there. They know that they have no chance to advance over the Dnieper River. So, of course, his only chance is to get this by negotiations, and no one in Ukraine wants to negotiate this with him. So he negotiates with the Americans and hopes that they will force the Ukrainian government to voluntarily pull out of these regions. And I really hope that the Ukrainian government will not give into this blackmail.
Okay, next let's talk about the Kursk region and what is the current situation there. What do you know about the situation in the Kursk? Because we have different information. Trump said that Ukrainian soldiers in Kursk region they are encirclement of more than 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers, and this is not true. Volodymyr Zelensky said, what do you know about the situation over there?
Yes, I mean, what I see from open source analysis is that Volodymyr Zelensky is absolutely right here. There has not been any encirclement. There have been, of course, difficult conditions to withdraw to the Sumy region. And also we see right now that Ukraine still holds around 4 villages in Kursk Oblast. So this means that there was also no plan to withdraw all forces. There was a plan to go to the heights. We heard this, I think, from some Ukrainian soldiers, because they offer a superior defense of Sumy region than withdrawing to the state border. So there has never been a siege. No Ukrainian soldiers have been besieged. And we have seen that the Russians try to lay sort of siege when they try to cut the biggest supply route to this remaining areas in Kursk. And I think the Russians have advanced 2 villages in Sumy. The first one was taken fully, and the second one, I think Basivka is the name, it was taken half. But this was really taken half, and not by a big number of soldiers, not even by infantry fighting vehicles, but it was maybe 10 soldiers coming with some quads. And you could see that first the Ukrainian army destroyed these quads. They hunted down the soldiers. And yesterday you could see a new video from Basivka where one of the surviving Russians surrendered to the Ukrainian troops who were on the other side of the road. So this means the Ukrainian army is present in Basivka. They are defending the last supply road, which has always been the last supply road to Socha. So there's nothing new about it. And all in all, the situation, I think, is very interesting, because in Kursk we have some Ukrainian troops remaining. But in nearby Belgorod Oblast, you have seen that there has been a Ukrainian attack on a couple of villages. I think the Ukrainian army has confirmed that there is an aim to create a buffer zone inside Russia, which is very interesting. And we will see how this evolves. Right now, I don't see the Russian army pushing further forward. You remember that after the fall of Malaya Lognia, another 25 villages and 1 town, Socha, have fallen within 2 days. So this was a very hard time for the Ukrainians. But right now, they are in a new position to defend. They are supplied, and they are not being forced out of Kursk.
And my next question about Sumy area, how do you assess the situation? Is there really danger for Sumy region? Can the foreign legions of the North Korea that fought in the Kursk region be redirected to the territory of Ukraine? What do you know about the agreements between Kim Jong Un and about Putin?
Well, as far as I know, and as far as I've seen from Ukrainian videos, the North Koreans have sort of disappeared, at least from the very front line. We haven't seen them there over the past, I would say, 3 weeks. So this doesn't mean they are back to North Korea. It could mean that they are back to the barracks in Kursk Oblast. It could mean that they are regrouping. So I cannot give any prediction there, because I don't know where the North Korean soldiers are. But I think they are not the biggest danger there. We have seen them in action before. It's like real meat assaults. It's like human waves, what we have seen in a much smaller scale right now, but what we have seen during the Korea War in the 1950s. And they haven't been very efficient. They have been hunted down by Ukrainian drones and artillery. So I think this is not the decisive factor. At the same time, you are totally right. Sumy is sort of not really surrounded, but it is being approached from 2 sides, from the north and from the east, by the Russian army, from Kursk Oblast, from Belgorod Oblast, and it's a very difficult and very dangerous situation there. I think the Russians are also seeking revenge, because Ukrainian army crossed the border, which again is absolutely right, absolutely illegal according to international law, because these 2 countries are at war. But right now you see this will of revenge that the Russians say, okay, you cross the border from Sumy, we will cross the border into Sumy, and we will pay back what you did to our town at least, Sucha, and some villages. Let's see if this works. I'm in contact with some soldiers in the area, and they say that during the 7 months in Kursk, we used the time. We built very strong fortifications in Sumy. And if the Russians really won't come, they should come, and we will do to them what we did to the first commando units there in Basivka.
And I would like to know your opinion about what is the strategy of Kim Jong-un. How do you think? How do you see it according to the to his decisions? What for Kim prepares his soldiers?
Well, I think just today, Sergei Shoigu is in North Korea. If I'm not misinformed, I saw him standing next to Kim Jong-un looking at some drones. I think the North Koreans got a lot from giving these soldiers. They got drone technology. We have seen this. They got other high tech. They got coal, as far as I'm informed. There have been some observations of Russian coal being shipped to North Korea. And as you know, they really need this because their country is in a very, very bad shape, even in a worse shape than Russia when it comes to the supply of the civilian population. So I think this is one reason. Also another reason, and you have heard recent report that China, at least reports that China maybe wants to do the same. The North Korean army didn't have any experience for 60 years. They didn't have any experience in fighting. They were just drilling. And I think for some of them, at least for the officers, not for the soldiers which were sacrificed, but for the officers to watch what's happening from the distance, this was a very useful experience there. Okay, they sacrificed maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 soldiers, killed and wounded, according to South Korean estimates. But their officers could see what's happening, how their soldiers are fighting, how drones are being used. So at least we heard this report that China was really interested in this and said, okay, if you are collecting experience at the cost of thousands of lives of your fellow countrymen, dear North Koreans, we want to do the same. We also want to sacrifice some thousand soldiers and maybe have a look at what's happening on the battlefield. So far, unfortunately, fortunately, it did not happen.
My next question is about the pace of the offensive that Russia can maintain. For how long? Or can Russia maintain the pace of the offensive they have now? And what about the Russian resources for this time? What do you know about that?
It's generally hard to say because you never know if the Russians are putting more material from the Far East, which they have maybe in depots, and to the west. We will see this. But in general, I think the last months have shown that they have less and less infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. I think this is obvious. Over the winter, we have seen large tank assaults of 5 to 10 vehicles being used in one assault. Right now, we are not seeing this anymore in a big scale for two reasons. First, many of these have been destroyed. But second, also the Russians know that some areas of the front line, especially around Pokrovsk, for example, or around Kupiansk, they are really much fortified by the Ukrainians. They have so many drone units in action, and the Russians just know that they will suffer 100% casualties among their vehicles if they attack. So the Russians are resorting to another strategy, which is their numerical superiority on the battlefield. They know the biggest deficiency Ukraine has is the infantry. They just know that Ukraine has not enough infanterists to guard the whole front. That's why Ukraine is resorting to American intelligence and their own drones and some other high-tech weapons. But the Russians know this. So wherever they have this superiority in their manpower, which does not mean the Russians are better fighters, it just means they are more fighters. Wherever they have this, they are advancing. As I said in the beginning, you can see this around Velika Novosilka. I think it's a very frightening situation there. The Russians have taken more than 70 square kilometers since they captured Velika Novosilka itself. They are advancing to the north, to the northwest, and they're still advancing. In other areas, you can see where there's a very effective Ukrainian defense, like Pokrovsk. The Russians are not advancing at all. For 2 months, they're not advancing 1 meter. They're rather being pushed back. But in all together, you have to see that it's a difficult situation. You have a 1,000-kilometer long front. where the Russians are now trying to regain the initiative in Zaporizhia. You have seen this; they're trying to go forwards there. I think Piatichatki is the name of the little village they have recaptured in this area, close to Kamyansk. And they try to regain a momentum there. At the same time, you see that they don't have enough men. It's the same problem. They're not advancing with 100 men or 1,000 men. It's maybe 20 men. But sometimes 20 soldiers is enough to overrun a Ukrainian village because it's only guarded by 5 Ukrainian soldiers. So if you have these drone units in place and ready to defend the Ukrainian soldiers on the ground, like we have seen in Kotlyne, for example, or in Shevchenko near Pokrovsk in the last days. It's working very well for the Ukrainians. But if for some reason you have a problem in supply or a problem in intelligence, then 10 or 20 Russian soldiers are enough to overrun another village and capture more Ukrainian land.
Okay, Europe now is thinking about sending peacekeeping contingents to the territory of Ukraine. They are looking for solutions for this. Can we say that we are close to a peace agreement? Or what is the purpose of probable deployment of foreign peacekeeping legions in the territory of Ukraine?
Yeah, first, I have heard this idea of Mr. Macron, I think, for 1.5 years now. And they have not been deployed any French troops. I think we have heard already a brigade will be going to Odessa. We have heard that only the Kiev area or the western Ukraine area, they could replace Ukrainian troops. They could free them to go to the front. We have heard so many ideas and nothing has materialized. So I think this is my first problem with these announcements. We have heard from the British and from the French that they are ready to send peacekeepers, but again, after a peace deal. I think none of them said that we will do this as long as the Russians are objecting. They said once we are there and Ukraine calls us in, we don't care what the Russians think. But again, this is after a peace deal. We don't see a peace deal on the horizon even. I explained the reasons for this before. From Russian perspective, there's no sense in doing a peace deal right now. They are under... they're still slowly advancing and they are under the pressure of their own constitution, unfortunately, because Putin, as imperialistic as he thinks, he annexed, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, and Donetsk oblasts. So he has to advance. I mean, it's an obligation he puts to himself. You would have to give him something very strong, something very big in return of not seeking or not wanting to advance anymore and not saying, yes, but we need to occupy everything there. It's our territory. This is what they claim. So in the end, I don't see a peace agreement, which means I don't see peacekeepers. We have heard the Russians saying if there are any peacekeepers, they should be from neutral countries, like from China. And I don't think Ukraine wants Chinese peacekeepers on its territory. So right now, I don't see this happening. I also cannot tell you when this happens because, again, Mr. Macron is promising at least one brigade for 1.5 years and nothing happened. So we will see if there will be something new. But again, I think it's a chain, it's connected, a failure of the Trump administration to reach a peace deal. And there has been absolute failure so far, despite all their efforts. This means also a failure of European countries to send peacekeepers.
Okay, one of the Macron's proposition is to send to Ukraine the UN mission as an alternative to peacekeeping troops. What is your opinion? How effective can this be?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you really find a consensus in the Security Council of the United Nations. And you know that Americans, unfortunately, are voting together with the Russians there right now, then it would be possible, theoretically. Again, what kind of peacekeepers are we talking about? If the Russians are saying they can be Bangladeshi or Kenyan, but not from NATO countries, then we have a big problem there. At the same time, the question is always, what kind of mission do these peacekeepers have? Do we have real peacekeepers which have a robust mandate to shoot at anyone threatening them or threatening a ceasefire? This would be interesting, but I think Americans and Russians will not agree to this. On the other way, or the other side, it's just peacekeepers in terms of what we have seen in Lebanon, for example, in UNIFIL. And then you have seen that as soon as the Hezbollah terrorists were firing a missile, they were just going to side and making space for them. As soon as the Israeli army moved in and fought the terrorists, they were also moved to side and they were staying in the barracks for their own security. So you don't need any peacekeepers which will just hide and run away and are unarmed and are not allowed to respond fire if they are being attacked or if anyone walks over the contact line. So I think all these questions are not solved. And unfortunately, again, I don't see anything of this being solved by the new American government, although they promised so.
Yes. The intelligence agency of European countries have stated that if the war in Ukraine ends, Russia could attack one of the NATO countries by 2030. How realistic do you think this prospect is, and which countries are at the risk?
Yeah. First, I'm not a very big fan of these forecasts because the year numbers we are hearing always depends on when these countries think they are ready to defend, which is really interesting. We have heard some 2 years ago or 1 year ago, it could be about 2027. And then someone said, oh, we will not be prepared for Russian attack in 27. So let's hope it will be about 2030, which is really interesting. We have heard from the German, not former, but the acting defense minister, we don't know if he will be defense minister of the next government, that the Russian attack could happen on Lithuania in 28, which is why our brigade will be there in 27. So our brigade will probably not be there in 27 because we have some issues there. So the question is, I mean, and this is ironically, of course, will Putin postpone the invasion because the Germans are not ready? So I think you have to be very skeptical about these numbers. That's the first point. The second point is I was already mentioning Lithuania, of course, with the Suwalki Gap on the one side and Belarus on the other side, which will be a big deployment area of Russian troops in the summer. I think Zapad 25 will take place. We'll see tens of thousands of Russian soldiers in this area. This is one point. Of course, the other Baltic states are another point. You have little Estonia and you have little Latvia, which are absolutely frankly and openly saying we cannot defend without American help. And right now, we don't have the guarantee that the Americans will help. It could be that they are withdrawing. It could even be that they stop our weapons from working like they have done in Ukraine. I don't hope they are on Russian side, at least, but it's not guaranteed. That's what I want to say, that they will help. If Putin sees that the Americans are not willing to help and they will even withdraw their forces from the Baltic states, I think he will attack earlier. But still, and I think this is important, everyone agrees as long as the fighting continues in Ukraine and Russia suffers high casualties as right now, 100 men a day in Ukraine, they will not attack a Baltic country. And this is why many analysts say either Russia must keep fighting in Ukraine, which I know it's very bad for Ukraine, for the civilian society especially, but also for the army, or we have to defeat Russia somehow. We have to make sure somehow that that you are not in a position to attack again once you are finished in Ukraine. I don't know how this is working, to be honest. I think, unfortunately, the most likeliest scenario right now is that either the war in Ukraine continues at a very, let's say, costly for both sides, but not much territory changes hands. Or the alternative is that there will be some kind of frozen conflict if in the coming months, for some reason, Ukraine and Russia agree to a ceasefire, negotiated by anyone, then in this case, I think the Russians could use their freed manpower. And, you know, they're producing right now around 50 tanks per month, which are being sent to Ukraine and being destroyed. If they're not being sent to Ukraine and destroyed, after 1 year, you can calculate that they will have a couple of hundred tanks and other vehicles which will be able and free to attack one of the Baltic states.
So, am I right? Your forecast for this war is protracted war, right?
Again, please. My focus on war? What do you mean?
It's a protracted war. I mean,
absolutely, yes. It's a protracted war. I don't know how it will end. It's really hard to say. We have Donald Trump in office more than 2 months now. He said he will end the war on day one, and some days ago, one of his government members said, "Yeah, but we didn't tell you which year on day one. So I think this is right now, unfortunately, the situation we are in, and this is the situation every Ukrainian civilian and soldier is suffering from.
Okay. Let's talk about the Europe military potential. According to the Bloomberg's publication, Europe lack gunpowder and TNT for the productions of projectiles. How effective, for your opinion, European countries is increasing the capacity of their military potential, and what is your assessment of it?
Yeah, as you know, Germany has been the biggest supplier of artillery rounds to Ukraine in 24 in Europe. Important in Europe, we have supplied 180,000 shells to Ukraine. The other countries were all much less. I know we have an increased production right now, so we have the materials to do more. But again, it depends on the European will, and as you have just seen. From the summits in Brussels and other towns, there is a couple of countries who are not willing to increase their production. A couple of countries who are either saying we have to go back and be friends with Russia, like Mr. Orban. Some leaders like Mrs. Meloni from Italy, who is saying we have to be friends with the Americans again. That's the first thing. And another leader like of Spain who has been saying, okay, Russia is not a problem at all. We have to see at infrastructure and social issues, which maybe has to do with he being a socialist. So what I want to say is that everything which was promised right now from the European side, from Ms. von der Leyen and from Kaja Kallas, it hasn't materialized so far. And also they get a lot of contra from the European leaders when they say something like this. So Mrs. Kallas has recently said Kaja Kallas, that Ukraine will get 2 million artillery rounds annually, so per year from Europe. I have no idea how she wants to realize this when Germany is with not even 10% of this, the biggest supplier. And the Americans have not enabled a single shell since Donald Trump is in office. You know, they're still delivering. But this is all from the Biden era. There's not been any new shell being agreed and allowed to Ukraine under the Trump administration. So it's still all deliveries which are being performed right now. So I have honestly no idea how we want to do this. I don't see the political will. I think many leaders in Europe have already forgotten what happened on February 24, 2022 in Ukraine. And this is a really big problem. We see some leaders, which especially in the countries bordering Russia and in the northern countries and partially in Germany, some leaders are still vigilant and are still ready to defend Europe. But other leaders want to go back to business, even with Russia.
Yes, unfortunately. Some countries really want to make business with Russia. Mr. Röpcke, thank you for the interview, for your explanations and analysis. I ask our viewers to send their feedback and comments to mark your viewing with button like. Please press it under this video. And Julian Röpcke, build analyst, was the guest of this stream. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.